Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Heather Castrillon from Riskified and Jorge Sanhueza from Pangea.
All right. Hello, everyone. As Derek aptly mentioned, we have 20 minutes before lunch, but hoping to keep everyone's attention here. So I have Jorge with me, and he is from Pangea. Pangea is a digital money transfer platform. If you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit more about your role and maybe a little bit more about, let's say, balancing some of the more complex nuances of the business, like the slim margins and things like that.
Of course. So if you see the operational chart, I own all the fraud process, since account creation, chargeback prevention, dispute resolution, right? But I would like to see myself, if you see actually how I measure, is how do we impact the business? Meaning that how do we translate this operation role to an enabler or retention, right? Customer activation. So then is a challenge. Okay, so how do we manage all this stuff, right, with this thin margin? We don't have 80% margin, right, that we can hide behind and do experiments and oops, we just missed this roster. So basically, how we see it is for each chargeback that we don't stop, we will need 80, 100 transactions just to recover, right? It's big impact on the business. So at the same time, as the margins are very thin, is we can overspend on manual reviews, right? Because also our customers are expecting a real-time transaction. And on that is how do we select vendors, how do we select partners, and how do we try to automate and add intelligence in every single step of the process? My perspective, I would love to have identity biometric for every single customer, but that will be extremely expensive and probably will be out of the business in 2 days.
So speaking of that, and just that whole evolution, like how has the experience been, given that you've been there since the startup phase, and shifting like the focus from just proving that business model out through that total optimization?
Yeah, so I joined Pangea when we had this concept of, okay, we're sending money through the phone. Wow, that sounds crazy, right? So I was part of this, how we call the non-fun department, which is AML, internal audit, fraud, everything that you don't see in Silicon Valley, the startup TV show, right? No one's dream is, hey, I want to be catching fraudsters in this super cool startup. So back in the day, we were just trying to clock everything and check out and say, okay, Jorge, just don't blow the company, right? So since then, we have been moving as a part that actually is helping to drive the economics of the company, right? No one want to invest in a company that's losing money on every single transaction, right? So we have been adapting to that, and that actually means like, okay, we need to optimize, of course, right? Not everything's going to be on the checkout. Why don't we start moving up on the funnel and see what we can actually use, pinging compliance, say, okay, what do we do in order to get basically decrease or, let's say, fraud evaluation cost, by also keeping the company running and customers also transacting. So when we start moving early in the funnel, we start discovering some very interesting things. We added ID validation and probably everything that you already guys know, right?
And so actually speaking of earlier in the funnel, I think when we were talking beforehand, we were talking about how the initial way that you were looking at fraud was focusing on that singular point, or just trying to catch it at a singular point throughout that customer journey, not journal. But what made you realize that, for your business at least, having a more holistic view of the funnel, of everything coming in, would actually be better for combating more of the sophisticated type of high volume attacks?
Yeah, so things have started changing, of course, and in our business, we realized that, of course, there's two-sided, right? There's some people sending money to themselves, but most of our customers are sending to a relative, so we start thinking about this two-side network. And at the same time, we were realizing that people start connecting with each other, right? Even if it's using a promo code, referral code. So we stopped basically looking at this as an isolated transaction, like one chargeback, and we start basically making these connections.
And making those connections is obviously really important in terms of how it is that you view and are able to catch everything throughout the entire journey. Operationally speaking, making that pivot or transitioning earlier on in that funnel, what did that look like and how did you manage that operationally? Because it is different when you shift from trying to catch everything at that singular point to moving everything earlier and identifying more of those risk profiles earlier on, even like before they hit the checkout stage.
Yeah, so that was a challenge, right? Because like having everything at the checkout, it was clogging every single pipeline, right? We were spending money in like watch list checks. We were having like fraudster bombing our customer service team. We had to have some like back office team reviewing transactions. So it was pretty much a mess. So we were actually looking these identities, right? We start doing identity checks without asking ID, without like biometrics. And then we were seeing how these senders were connected, how we essentially were sending to the same recipient. And we basically apply our own knowledge on AML, and we started adding that perspective on how we conducted this investigation, and we start moving that logic on top of the funnel. So basically, when customers were creating an account, we already were able to have a risk classification from them. We were able to see if they were connected, working part of another network. So we can either add more, like block the account, add more friction, or on the other side of the coin, have them having like more straightforward and seamless experience to the checkout.
Okay. And when you're looking at all of these different points, one of the things that comes in is going to be more pattern recognition, right? Because it's less of the isolated, let's say, lone wolf users right now, but more of the general pattern recognition. So how have you leveraged that at that point in time from shifting away from looking at just the singular sole lone wolf type of actors to the, let's say, more organized, systemic, coordinated types of fraud networks?
Yeah, so of course, when we jumped in network pattern recognition, we try to do with pretty much every single nerd trial to do. So I find these sophisticated methods to create probabilistic link, all that kind of stuff. But when we get to the basic, right, we were linking senders and recipient, just connecting like contact information, even like phone number, email of the recipient, and bank account information. So we were trying to play safe in the term, okay, we're just going to use this when we're sure that these people is actually a network, because we want to prevent to offend our customers, right? So our plug is for families, right? So it's family sending to family. So think about it, if you start connecting because the IP and the time and the weather, and you made a mistake and you find this whole network and you ended up like blocking the whole family sending money to their mothers, right? Especially this weekend, that's going to be Mother's Day. It will be this like disaster for the business.
Okay, and then that's also, speaking of the family challenges, in terms of how it is that you're sending money and everybody's using it like for families, it's also that instant reaction, right? Because usually when they're sending it, they need, and like they're expecting that transfer right then and there. So there's that additional level of, let's say, how serious it is when something gets blocked, because it's something that like the family on the recipient, let's say, is expecting in that moment in time.
Yeah, so this is beyond business or CEO will always make the point that this is not, I don't want to offend anyone here, but like vanity sneakers. It's like people who actually have a family, like an actual need in another country to receive the money right away, right? So we don't have a space for like lengthy reviews, manual reviews, escalations. So we try to manage everything in real time, and everything needs to be automated, right? So that has been I think the biggest challenge for us.
And well, there's also another layer here, because when you're talking about, or like when we look at fraud from almost every other type of industry, it's more one-sided. Over here, because of that aspect of it being sender and recipient, there is this dual-sided nature to it as well, where it's critical that you not only know who's actually sending, but you also need to know all of the recipient data and how important, like, essentially, from your side, like, how important is having the recipient data to being able to actually monitor and navigate and identify fraud?
Yeah, so it's paramount. We understood that, again, this is not just a customer buying or doing something from themselves. It's like two-sided. So both side information is really important. And what makes things complicated is not all the countries where our receivers are have the same requirements, same KYC policies, right? So we needed to adapt and leverage those data points to be able to analyze every single relationship as it's part of like a network, right? A network of people, network of recipients. Those relationships matters.
And when, because we've been working as partners together for a really long time, there's obviously a lot of shifts and changes that you guys have done at Pangea throughout in terms of, and we mentioned it earlier, from identifying fraud at a singular point in time to looking at the whole customer journey. How has the experience been working with Riskified and like leveraging Riskified as more of like an extended team of your own?
It's so I think we were lucky because we have the best account management team, right? So
it's a plug-in for you, Nadav. Good
yeah,
job.
no, it's really good. So the first thing is communication, right? At some point, we stopped discussing just pricing, approval, decline, false approval, et cetera, and started working together. Our team is very small, right? So I don't have the capabilities to hire data scientists just to do analysis, just to test something, right? So we came all together, right? And essentially, we shifted to try to add value where you guys have less visibility. It's, okay, what's happened with this chargeback, right? What happened here? And start trying to add, like, hey, this data point, probably you guys are not seeing it, right? This is how it worked for us, right? Why don't we test, why don't we create a segment and have the whole Riskified team behind us, right? Doing this test, helping us with even like internal business cases so we can move these initiatives on top of the list, right? Because like somebody just say here is like no one is actually hooray for like, hey, fraud, we have this new fraud things, right? But at the same time, what we have proved, it's less of use, like customers see fraud the best, right? So new feature for fraud is not, hey, we have awesome, they have this identity verification. It's, hey, they don't do it, right? So I'm always keeping to do this in real time. And that's a gain for fraud. That's a gain for compliance as well, right? Of course. So that is what we have been able to do with Riskified. They have helped us run all these experiments and put this in a way that for the business makes sense, right? So if I talk to my manager, right, and I say, oh, we'll have this decline rate or chargeback rate, they don't care, right? But if we start talking about the conversion, if we do this, the approval is going to skyrocket, right? And we're going to keep chargeback like easy, right? So is what has been possible with the help of Riskified team.
All right, so then maybe let's take it a layer deeper, right? So that was how it is that we're able to effectively work together as a team and leverage all of the additional data points, let's say, that we don't or we might not have had full visibility into, and then like incorporating that to be able to improve and optimize throughout the performance. What have been some of the more like measurable impacts of this strategy and leveraging us?
Yeah, so we have, during this year, we have seen like very deep transformation, right? So some of the segments, some of the products that we have the higher risk, we have been able to slash the chargeback rate in 7x, right? Which is unthinkable, right? And at the same time, we have been able to increase the approval rate for our first-time customers, which is paramount, right? In about 4%. Right, which is incredible for the business.
Okay.
And of course, we have been able to keep our headcounts very on budget, right? Which is something that's really appreciated as well.
Yeah, and you said the team is very lean, right? So being able to help and work together in this way where you're getting the increase in the approval rates, keeping the chargebacks down, but also keeping that team lean as a goal. That's great. So Derek also mentioned something on how a lot of the sessions have been around AI or have focused or had some kind of question on AI. We are the last Q&A session, so I think my prompt will actually be the last question about AI. So here it goes. As the industry is pivoting to, and it's always pivoting towards like cost optimization, but how are you currently leveraging AI agents to help keep your team agile?
Yeah, so let me backtrack, because when the companies started having this conversation about AI, right, the first reaction is like, dude, we have been doing AI, ML since the last 10 years, right? And so now that we are talking about Gen AI agents, we started with the basic, right? Just getting rid of this like lengthy report that every Monday morning writing, okay, what happened, nothing happened, so what I want to say, and replace it with Gen AI, right? The next steps, it was like managing chargeback dispute. Think about the same, like Word document writing every single time, the same thing, like templates. We replaced that with Gen AI, right? We added more knowledge, and we were able to also catch up with like changes on the card, right? And that's skyrocketed our win rate, right? Right now, like having chargeback disputes is no longer a pain. The next step is, okay, how do we multiply the team, right? But not just in the base of the operation. So we start leveraging agents, for example, to run models, identity models, right? Okay. Something that I might have done or myself or data science right now. We're able to customize different models, test the models, add rules, and translate those rules, again, on top of the funnel, right? And at the same time, we have been able to do things on the promo code, and we are in that path, right? So what next is, right now we basically with AI, right? If you see AI, things like AML, like approve decline, to today that we're going to be running different rules, and we have kind of like a data science team in a box. We haven't changed the number of team members, so we will continue in that path. And what's next now is we have heard a lot of agentic commerce, MRC agentic commerce here, agentic commerce, and we are trying to get ahead of the business, right? So when they realize that agentic commerce is not just ChatGPT and a transaction for me, it has many complications, that's where we want to be, right? And I'm pretty sure we're going to be riskified with that as well.
All right. Any final thoughts or closing remarks to send us properly off?
Yeah, so the first thing is like this 10 years with Riskify or more has been a really enrichment experience, amazing experience. And lastly, understand that the customer journey, how people is connected, is paramount for our business. So I encourage everyone in our space to at least take a look on this, on things that we have learned this path as well.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.